Might as well get right to it. Is there any doubt in your mind that Rob Sand is running for governor?
Well, I think in his mind he thinks he's running for governor. After this last couple of days, I'm not sure that pollsters and political consultants are going to suggest that he run for governor. But I no, this is obviously the shenanigans, which I'm guessing you're going to ask me about. The shenanigans that he attempted to pull, abusing his office, is all about trying to run for governor. And there's no doubt. No.
When Mr. Sand, who is currently the state auditor, elected in 2018, was on the program most recently, maybe a month ago, he certainly opened the door and said he was strongly considering a run. And yesterday the news came out. Frankly, I didn't see any news about it until the governor's news release rebutting this report about misspending COVID funds. Talk that through from your perspective. And again, you're the chair of the Republican Party of Iowa, but laws are pretty plainly written. Give us your sense on Auditor Sand's report and the governor's response.
Well, I mean, clearly, Jeff, Auditor Sands didn't read the bill. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, and I am the Republican chair, but I also was a lawmaker for 8 years. I mean, a page could read this statute and realize that Rob Sand did not read its entirety. I mean, the statute is I call it the name and likeness statute. It's a statute, and it's in the spirit of the statute, and what the statute is trying to prevent is a good thing. Look, I mean, it's the public officials should not be spending money to promote themselves. On the other hand, Jeff, they also shouldn't be using their office, like the Office of Auditor, to do that as well. But that's another line of questioning. I'll stick on this one. And so the bottom line is that there is a waiver at the very beginning of the law, for crying out loud. And that waiver says that you can appear in these public service announcements, these PSAs, if there is an emergency. This is an emergency. The pandemic was an emergency. And here's the other thing that Sand is not telling anyone, because obviously this is political theater for him. And that is Tom Vilsack, former Democratic governor, was on this same PSA, for crying out loud. The governor was in touch with the Ethics Campaign and Ethics Board. Sand was not. I mean, this is absolute ridiculousness. Why he doesn't say I messed up and move on, I have no idea. But I understand that he's just doubling down on this. And there's so many things wrong here, Jeff. It doesn't give me a lot of confidence. I mean, first of all, we got a state auditor without a CPA. Now we've got a state auditor we know doesn't read the statutes, and now we've got a state auditor that can't admit that he's wrong. I mean, so there's so many things wrong with this, but the bottom line is this. The governor is 100% in compliance with the law. That's why you're hearing crickets around Iowa. The only person defending Auditor Sand is Sand. And, the irony of all of this is with his incorrect and political accusations towards the governor, he is utilizing his office to do that report. He's now utilizing his office to try to defend himself. So in the act of following this through and not admitting his own incompetency, he is actually guilty of exactly what it is that he falsely accused the governor of. You can't write a script any more ridiculous than this for Rob Sand.
Now let me hone in on one thing that you said, just to make sure I understood it correctly. You're saying that it's your understanding that the governor's office did contact the ethics folks before she appeared in the public service announcement.
Yeah, it has been reported that the campaign and ethics was contacted by her office, and it's also been reported and that Sand and the auditor did not contact the campaign and ethics. Now that's been reported.
Okay.
This thing just gets crazier and crazier. I mean, this really is a situation where the auditor has misused his microphone, misused the duties of his office, and now he absolutely does not. I mean, he's backed himself into a corner. He doesn't know how to get out, and the double talk and everything isn't going to get him out of this one. It's just that simple. I mean, I guess I could live with an auditor without a CPA, although I think it's pretty ridiculous. But let me tell you something: Iowans are not going to be able to live with an auditor that doesn't even read the laws that he's citing in his own reports.
Jeff Kaufmann is the chair of the Republican Party of Iowa. He's joining us live on this Friday morning on News Talk 1540 KXEL. So there's a little bit, some might say, of circularity here, and so I just want you to respond to it. The
Sure.
law, as I understand it, allows for some of these likeness, the use of image and likeness. It's permissible if there's an emergency. Well, the governor declares an emergency and then appears herself in the spot. Is there any sort of a conflict there, potentially, that you see that people could point toward?
Absolutely not. Not in an emergency situation. And look.
Well, but she declares the emergency, so do you see how some could say, well, now, wait a minute, if perhaps COVID is a different situation because of the global nature of it, but I'm just, in a more broad sense, I'm saying the same person who can declare the emergency potentially could benefit from it, and some might call that an abuse.
Well, the premise of that, and that's a fair question, Jeff, but the premise of that is that somehow an elected official is going to declare an emergency just for the sake of getting their name and their face in front of the public. And believe me, any public official that did that, Iowans would sniff that out in a second. The bottom line is no one can argue that the pandemic was an emergency, and I don't believe anyone can argue that the leader of our state, and by the way, another bit of irony here, is a leader that has been pummeled by Sand, again, while he's playing politics on the clock in the auditor's office, which he's done from day one since he took his oath of office. They have been criticizing the governor for not leading the way, which is, in my opinion, completely false. But here we are. She is taking the lead. She is extending her neck in a bipartisan way with former Democratic Governor Vilsack and others. And then he pulls this stunt while she's leading Iowans through the pandemic. I mean, you can't, this just drips with hypocrisy by this guy. And, but so, the bottom line is, when there is a national emergency, we expect to hear from the president. Jeff, if there was a national emergency now, I would expect to hear from Joe Biden. I'm not a Joe Biden fan, but I expect to hear from Joe Biden. I expected to hear from Chet Colbert. I expected to hear from Tom Vilsack, two Democrats that were governor. Iowans expect to see their governor in an emergency situation. To even suggest what Rob Sand is suggesting, aside from the fact he didn't read the bill and or doesn't understand it, this was just ridiculousness. And he's a political novice, obviously. And I think eventually he wanted to, if Iowa's a Thanksgiving dinner, Rob Sand has always been at the card table. I'm going to tell you one thing for sure. He's not moving up to the big table with this stunt. I can guarantee you that.
He's Jeff Kaufmann. He's the chair of the Republican Party of Iowa.